Alright, CNT125. We are working on our IPv6 lab. So I've downloaded the lab directions, and I've even downloaded my packet tracer file. And I have my lab directions here ready to go, right there. And actually I'll scroll there, there's the beginning. And I have my packet tracer file loaded and ready to go. Now before we dig in, just conceptually, we're basically repeating the routing lab we did, the first week of the semester, if you will. But this time, instead of using IPv4 addresses, we're going to use IPv6 addresses for the routers, for all the router interfaces, and even on our workstations. And so that way we're actually moving IP6 data through our network. So just concept-wise, that's what we're going to do. All right, so I've downloaded my lab directions here. Here's my packet tracer file. We have 2 routers, 2 switches, a couple workstations, very much like our router lab that we did, week 1. But this time through, we are going to use IPv6 addresses. And you're going to notice right off the bat on this map, I have ports marked, I have subnets marked, but I don't have the individual addresses marked. Because, if you remember, typically when we set IPv6 addresses, the first half of the IPv6 address is like the network portion. The second half is like the host portion. The host portion we usually derive from the MAC address of that interface. So throughout, there's blanks everywhere because we need to find the MAC address of that interface and we'll add it to it. But we're going to do lots of copy pasting to make our life easier. But as we look at the map, though, we'll see we're dealing with the FD00A:A:A network over here, FD00A:A:B network up here, and over here the FD00A:A:C network over here. So basically the A subnet, the B subnet, and the C subnet. That's what we're doing, just concept-wise. So take a minute, orient yourself there, and then we are going to cable up and get ready to go. And just for my example today, I made a copy of the map, and so I have it handy to reference as we do stuff. All right, so let's get cabled up. We're going to cable, actually I'll pull my map right back up. We are going to cable up here. We're going to use a crossover between the 2 routers up here. So crossover, we want to use the gigabit 01 port up here over to the gigabit 001 over here. Okay, just follow your ports. We'll need our straight through from here. We're using gigabit 00 into, we're using, I'm pretty sure, gigabit 01 this time. And then over here on this switch, we're using gigabit 000 into gigabit 01 on this guy. And again, just double check your ports and where they're going. Workstations, we're not doing anything on the switch, so really these could go in any port. We're not doing any kind of VLANs or anything like that, but there we go. And we will be cabled up. There we go. We are cabled up and we are now ready to roll. So let's connect into the router and get some basic config on. So I'm just going to start on one router and I'm going to end up repeating for the other router when we're done. So we'll connect into the first one over here. Command line, enable config T. Let's give it a host name. This time through, I think I'm having you use 2911_IP version 6. That way we know it's IPv6 config this time. Now, we're going to select our interface and let's do the 00 and then we'll do the 01. So let's pick the 00 interface, gigabit Ethernet 0/0, no IP address because the command IP address is for IP version 4. We need IP version 6 address. And to do this, we are going to, we make this wider now, we are going to plug in basically the network portion, and we're going to let the router fill in the last half of the address with the end of the MAC address for this interface. Remember, any interface, whether it be a NIC or a switch port or router interface, has a MAC address assigned to it or associated with it. So we are going to specify the network piece, the first half, the first 64 bits, and we're going to let the router fill in the remaining 64 bits with its MAC address. So the command for this guy is, we are going to specify FD00, remember hexadecimal 0 through 9, A through F, so zeros, not O's, FD00, A colon A colon A colon colon /64. We're saying, okay, the first half is network, and then we are going to say, hey, this unique identifier, grab the 64, take the tail end of your MAC address, if you will, and slide it into this and make it a unique identifier for this interface. It goes, okay. So now we'll do no shutdown, and we will exit out of this guy. That interface is done. Let's go do the other interface. This we need gigabit 0/1 for this guy. We're going to say no IP address because that is version 4. We're going to say IP version 6 address. And again, we'll do FD00 A colon B because this will be the B subnet going across the WAN link. Okay, we are using this right here. We're using the B subnet up here on this WAN link. So B, then we need /64. The first half of the address is network. Then we're telling it, hey, take and use the MAC address to create the last half of the address. No shutdown on this guy as well. Exit. Now, this interface is on. This one's not on yet because it is actually tied to this guy. Okay, so we will need to finish that before that link goes online. But there is our first router. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to exit. Let's do a show run. I know I don't have in the directions, but I'll just do a show run real quick to show you. Here's my two interfaces. No IP address, but I have established this. I have established this. Later on, we'll go back and look at what it actually associated. All it shows here is the network piece and says, okay, we're going to make the last half from the MAC address. So I will show you how to look at that in a little bit. I'll just do a copy run start on this guy, save what I got, and I'm actually going to do a file save on my packet tracer before I go any further. File save as, I think I'm having you guys use, your last name, Brown, IPv6 lab or something like that. IPv6 lab, that'll work. Now I have my packet tracer saved and I have that saved. All right, I'm now going to repeat this same process on the other router. Enable config T, host name on this guy. We're going to do 4321 IPv6. We're going to say interface. Let's do the 000 again. Gigabit Ethernet 0/0/0. No IP address because that is IP version 4. We're going to say IP version 6 address. And again, let's look at our map. We are doing this over here. A colon C. Okay, so we need FD00, not OO, A colon C subnet, /64, EUI 64. And again, that takes the MAC address and makes it into the usable last half of the IP version 6 address. No shutdown on this guy. He should be coming online. And I should see blinky green light over here, which I do. Now let's do the gigabit 0/0/1, the WAN link between the two, this guy right here. So we're going to say no IP address. We're going to do IP version 6 address. And looking at our map, we need the FD00 A colon B subnet. FD00 A colon B subnet /64 EUI 64. No shutdown. And that'll bring that link online. So that link should now be starting to show green, and it is. So again, I can do show run, and I will see that I have configured both interface. I don't know the exact details of it. That is something I can look up in a little bit, but I'm going to at least save what I have so far. Yahoo. And I'll even save this here real quick too. All right, so going back to my lab, I now have configured both routers with name and the two interfaces. All right, and I even have a reminder here, don't do that for both routers. The next thing we need to do is get IP version 6 routing going on these two. So we're going to plug in the command IP version 6 unicast routing, and then we're going to enable the RIP protocol on each of my interfaces. Okay, so this guy, config T, we need IP, there we go, IP version 6 unicast routing. So that gets enabled. And now we're going to go to each interface and enable IP version 6 RIP. So we will now do interface gigabit 0/0 on this guy. And we will say IP version 6 RIP process 1 enable. And that is running on that interface. We'll do it on our other interface, gigabit 0/1. IP version 6, RIP process 1, back here, enable, exit. So we now should have RIP running on this guy as well. And I will actually see it under the interfaces. I will see that under the interfaces. Okay. I'll do a copy run start on this guy so I don't lose what I got. And I will repeat this on the other router now. Here, config T. We need IP version 6 unicast routing. Now we'll say interface gigabit 0/0/0, and we want to do IP version 6 RIP process 1 enable. I'm going to select my other interface, exit, and we'll look at the running config now. And we will see the RIP process is running on each of these interfaces as well. We run start on this guy. Okay, so we now have the basic IP6 config for interfaces on my router ports, and we have IP version 6 RIP running on both routers. So at this point, I would do a quick check to make sure I do have blinky link light green everywhere. You know, save my router, save my packet tracer file so I don't lose any progress. We will get into looking at some of the routing and configuration that we have set on these devices. But before I even do that, I don't have it written in there. But let's take a quick look at show IP version 6 interface, and we'll say gigabit 0/0 in this guy. If I look at the gigabit 00 interface, now that it's up and running, it'll show you that here is the address that we just set. We set the subnet of FD00A:A:A and said the first 64 is network, and then we said, hey, please use the MAC address for the second half. It filled that in right here for you. So there now is the full MAC address of that, or excuse me, the IP version 6 address of that interface. And if I keep that there, and I now go show interface gigabit 01 and compare, here's the 01 interface, 7502. This one up here was 7501. Okay, it actually has, that's a neat little thing about the MAC addresses on these, they're usually sequential. So the IP addresses on these are 7501 and 7502, which is kind of cool. But there is the actual IP address, IP version 6 address of my two router interfaces. And I could repeat that on the same router over here too. Show IP version 6 interface, and I can do gigabit on this guy 0/0/0 and see its addresses. He's right there, 3901. And I could do this one right here, and I'll probably find that he's 3902. There he is, sequential 3902. So there is my actual router interface IP addresses. I didn't have that written in here yet. I have it written in later in the lab, but I figured we'd stop before we go any further and look at our config. If I hover my mouse over, I will also see them there, 7501 and 7502. And over here, I'll see that they are, 3901 and 3902. But there is my interfaces. There's my interface addresses. All right, when we come back in the next part, we'll start looking at some more of the router functionality.